Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
Our ongoing preview of October's Truck to Success seminar continues with a look at financing equipment. Margot Fries of OOIDA walks us through that process, and Charles Sperry of the OOIDA Foundation has some strong words of caution about lease purchase agreements. Traditionally, truckers and enforcement officers are considered to be on opposite sides, but in fact, sometimes they work together, and when they do, it tends to go very well. The latest example is in Wisconsin. I'll speak with Sergeant Daniel Diedrich of the Wisconsin State Patrol. And finally, a coalition of organizations, including OOIDA, has sent a letter to the U.S. House asking them to take specific action on truck parking. I'll get the latest on that and more from Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. When it comes to third-party or non-consensual towing, all truckers want is a level playing field and transparency. That was OOIDA's message to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration in formal comments regarding predatory towing in the trucking industry. The association wrote that drivers just want to be treated fairly and respectfully, but that there's a big problem when a tow bill that should not exceed $1,000 turns into an invoice for tens of thousands. The financial impact on small business truckers can be devastating. It's something that came up during a hearing within the House Highways and Transit Subcommittee last month in this exchange between Congressman Mike Collins and OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh.
The towing industry has been ripping off the trucking industry for decades. I know for a fact, I just saw a truck that had an accident by itself, ran off the interstate. The towing bill was $78,000.
I had a member who received a tow bill a couple weeks ago in the state of Pennsylvania. They were charged $9,000 heat and humidity charge with a 10% administration fee on top of that. It was well over a $60,000 tow bill.
Most regulated, taxed, burdened industry in the world.
Earlier this year, FMCSA held a meeting aimed at improving transparency for towing fees charged to motor carriers. During opening remarks, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said predatory towing is an issue the department wants to tackle because it has far-ranging effects.
This department has been clear in our support for protections against predatory towing junk fees. Truckers often have to travel far from home to deliver the goods that everybody depends on. In the event that their truck gets towed, they may not have any relationship or familiarity with the towing company that moves their vehicle. Until they get that vehicle back, their job, and really their livelihood, is put on hold. Tow truck drivers also play an essential role in keeping our roads safe by removing disabled vehicles. But in some cases, some players in the towing space recognize and exploit the vulnerability of these situations. Of course, there are necessary and fair costs associated with the towing of a commercial vehicle. But some companies have seen an opportunity to charge exorbitant fees, even in the tens of thousands of dollars, before returning the vehicle back to the truck driver. That isn't right. It isn't fair. And it's why we recently urged the FTC to ban predatory towing fees that unfairly increase costs for commercial vehicle owners and operators. This includes hiding fees until the tow is completed, charging for unnecessary or worthless services, or imposing an excessive number of fees for excessive amounts just because a towing company thinks that they can get away with it.
In November, the Federal Trade Commission published a notice of proposed rulemaking, which would prohibit unfair or deceptive practices relating to fees for goods and services. In a recent notice, FMCSA wrote that such a regulation would have a significant effect on predatory towing practices. While artificial intelligence could bring a number of benefits to the trucking industry, OOIDA warns that moving too fast on the emerging technology could be dangerous. The USDOT recently asked stakeholders to offer their thoughts on AI's applications in trucking. In its comments, OOIDA cautioned the DOT not to embrace unproven and unreliable AI technology that will not satisfy the department's safety objectives. While technology has made trucks safer over time, OOIDA notes that some emerging technologies have distracted drivers, do not work as designed, or are too expensive for small business trucking companies to afford. One such example is automatic emergency braking systems. Despite concerns, complaints, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration investigating false activations with certain Daimler trucks, NHTSA and FMCSA are moving forward with a final rule that would mandate AEBs for new trucks. With regard to AI, OOIDA asked the DOT to consider safeguards that protect small businesses, the trucking workforce, and consumers. The Biden administration is expected to propose barring Chinese software in autonomous vehicles in the coming weeks. Citing unnamed sources, Reuters reports the proposed rule would apply to Chinese software in U.S. vehicles with Level 3 automation and above. The move would also effectively ban the testing of autonomous vehicles produced by Chinese companies on U.S. roadways. Asked for a comment, a U.S. Commerce Department spokesperson said the department is concerned about the national security risks associated with connected technologies in connected vehicles. Hurricane Debbie made landfall Monday as a Category 1 storm, prompting emergency declarations in 3 separate states. Florida has 2 emergencies in effect right now, one expiring on August 8th and another on August 15th. Georgia and South Carolina each have one. All provide motor carriers and drivers providing direct assistance to disaster areas, relief from size and weight restrictions. The National Hurricane Center reports that Debbie made landfall with 80-mile-an-hour winds. Forecasters are warning of life-threatening storm surges in Florida and major flooding across southeastern states in the days to come. The Nebraska State Patrol needs help tracking down a truck driver they say was involved in a deadly hit-and-run crash last week. It happened Thursday evening on Interstate 80 near Big Springs, Nebraska. When troopers arrived on scene, they found a 72-year-old man dead on the shoulder. Investigators believe he was changing a tire when he got hit by a passing vehicle. Based on evidence, they believe that vehicle was a semi, but they don't have much else to work off of right now. If you know or saw anything, or if you notice a semi with front-end damage in the area, you're asked to contact the Nebraska State Patrol. The Canadian trucking company suspended after British Columbia began cracking down on bridge strikes says it's being harassed. Chohan Freight Forwarders was suspended from operating in the province late last year, following the company's 6th bridge strike in 2 years. The Vancouver Sun reports that Chohan Freight Forwarders recently sent a letter to BC Transportation Minister Rob Fleming asking it to be taken off of a public list detailing the bridge strikes. Chohan said its drivers and employees were being verbally abused because of it. The company says one incident even involved someone pouring coffee on their equipment. Minister Fleming reportedly refused to remove Chohan from the public list, but encouraged the company to report incidents of harassment to the police. Chohan's license to operate in British Columbia remains suspended, a move they have appealed. The company has also sued the province, seeking to resume operations. And finally, Texas truckers, beware. A commercial vehicle safety enforcement blitz will take place this week along several highways. The Texas Department of Public Safety says law enforcement will be conducting what's called a distracted, reckless, impaired visibility enforcement or safe drive initiative for 3 days starting on Tuesday. Troopers with the Texas Highway Patrol will have a concentrated focus on commercial vehicles traveling along Interstates 10, 20, 35, 40, and 45. Officials say it's all part of an effort to reduce commercial vehicle crashes on major interstate corridors. CMVs and passenger vehicles will be targeted, with troopers on the lookout for aggressive drivers, speeders, tailgaters, and those who may be distracted. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Do you have a news tip? Maybe you have a comment about something you heard on the air, or maybe you just have a question about something happening in the trucking industry. Email us at landlinenow@ooida.com. Next, Scott Thompson discusses financing a truck with Margot Fries of OOIDA and lease purchases with Charles Sperry of the OOIDA Foundation. I'll speak with Sergeant Daniel Diedrich of the Wisconsin State Patrol about the state's Trooper in a Truck program, and we'll hear about a letter from a coalition of groups about truck parking from Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Less weight, more freight. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Our continuing series in the lead up to OOIDA's Truck to Success seminar continues with another look at what people will learn if they attend. It's a preview of sorts, and today we're going to focus on financing and lease purchase contracts. Here to help are Margot Fries and Charles Sperry. Margot is with OOIDA's Claims Department, and Charles is with the OOIDA Foundation. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you too.
So we talked recently with Greg Frary of Truck Tractor Trailer about buying a truck. That's obviously a huge purchase and a really big decision. But Margot and Charles, you're going to tell us that there are a lot of other big decisions with regard to money and financing. And if you don't have the cash, you're probably going to be looking at financing. I think most people probably are for good reason. Margot, can you walk us through, first of all, that need for financing and I think kind of the types of equipment that people tend to finance?
Sure. So the need for financing is that you do not take all of your capital that you have set aside for operating and use that for the purchase of the equipment that you need. Also, with a business, you need to establish good credit because there's going to be a time that you're going to need a loan and you're going to need that help. So establishing it early on, even before you start your venture, is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I imagine most people don't have have all the cash sitting there. I mean, I guess some people do.
They possibly can, but when you're talking $30,000 to $60,000, $120,000 for a truck, it adds up really quick, and you need to keep that aside.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, too, that even if you do have that, it is worthwhile to finance for the credit.
Yes, to build the credit.
Implications there, yeah. We're talking about, types of equipment. Obviously, there's a lot out there. But when you're talking about types of equipment that people typically finance, what are we talking about?
The typical equipment that we see in the commercial industry is your trucks, your trailers. APUs have been very popular. And then now also engine rebuilds. Some lenders will do rebuild loans because owner-operators want to keep a truck that they're familiar with. And so it makes sense that when the engine is time to be replaced, to rebuild that engine, keep your truck, and then have a loan on it to pay it off.
And again, these are the things that you kind of walk people through at Truck to Success. It's overwhelming. I think that's probably safe to say, especially when you wrap in all of the other things that are covered in the 3 days there. In terms of financing, there are multiple ways to do it too, right?
Yes,
Which can be confusing as well, right?
Yes, it can be very confusing in the commercial industry. You have several types of financing that is offered. One is a simple interest loan, which most of us are all familiar with, your typical banks and the captive finance companies within the commercial market like PACCAR, Mercedes-Benz, Volvo. Those are your normal captive finance companies. But then you get into the banks or lenders that are not the captives but are willing to do the commercial loans. So with that, you'll start looking at what's called an equipment finance agreement or residual leases. Both of those are good
options.
Good options for loans. We have the lease purchases that we're not fond of and that we try to steer our members away from. If it was me, I would always look at a loan first because it's simple interest and it just makes sense because your interest is going to decrease as you make your payments. The thing you have to be careful of with any lease is that they're going to charge you all of the interest, whether you pay for it on 6 months or it's full full term at the 48 or 60 months, you're paying all of that interest. So if there is a loss on the truck or trailer and it's a total loss, you very well could be upside down because there's still a lot of interest to be paid on that lease.
With that in mind, and again, with all the overwhelming confusion that is out there, you mentioned something there, lease purchases. Charles, I know this could be, it could feel like, and it does feel like, an attractive option for a lot of folks out there because on the surface, it sounds good, it makes sense. However, as Margo, you kind of said there, the warning bells, the warning lights, the warning signs should really be going off if you're going that route for a number of reasons. I will let you just kind of take it from there, Charles, because there are a whole host of concerns, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, with the lease purchase program, it's the same issue that miners used to have, like with the old company store. You know, they would get their paycheck, and then they would have to turn right around and give that entire paycheck right back to the boss to pay for their needs, their necessities, you know, and the upkeep of their own life. Anytime where you have the boss that's providing your work, and then you have to go ahead and pay them for the means that you have to actually fulfill that work. There's a huge conflict of interest there, and there can be a massive, massive loophole for a lot of abuse. And we do see that over and over unfortunately, within a lot of people that get into these lease purchase programs. They think, oh, this is a great thing, you know, this company right here, not only are they going to provide me work, they're also going to give me that truck, and I can just pay a little extra right there, and I'm going to end up with my own vehicle. Unfortunately, in our experience, most of them never end up with that vehicle. Why? Because they have lots and lots of issues that seem to pop up. Mm-hmm. Extra fees for random things, mm-hmm. A huge escrow account that's supposed to be for repairs but doesn't ever really seem to get used for the repairs that they need on their truck. Issues like once they start getting close, you know, if they manage to make it far enough, once they start getting close to that point where it looks like they may that truck is in reach, that they may actually get that, all of a sudden their work dries up. And when they start looking around and saying, hey, you know, where's my work? Where are my loads? They're like, the company will respond, we just don't have any right now for you, strangely enough. We just don't seem to have any for you. And unfortunately, their lease locks them in to work just for that company. They can't get out of that. If they try to break that lease, all of a sudden, well, guess what? Their truck is forfeit. If they don't accept a load because, you know, they're going to lose money on it, all of a sudden their truck is forfeit. Anything that they do that is not in accordance with every single little detail that their company that they have this lease with, if they don't follow exactly their instructions, their truck can be forfeit.
Yeah. And as we found out through the Truck Leasing Task Force, which is looking at predatory lease purchase agreements, that is not uncommon, unfortunately, the situation that you laid out there.
It's incredibly common.
And it's incredibly, exactly.
It's actually the norm rather than the exception, unfortunately.
Right, which is, again, I think getting back to what we were talking about, it makes sense as to why that would be appealing to people who are starting out. I completely understand it, but you got to watch out for what you're walking into.
Yes. Now, to explain just a little bit more, that isn't to say that every lease program is a bad deal. But what you want to watch out for are the lease purchase programs where the company that you're leasing from is the same company that's providing you with your loads. Avoid those like the plague. Do not do it.
They just make it too easy to sign on that dotted line.
And if it's too easy or it's too good to be true, it probably is, which is what we talk about. I'm curious, Margo, from previous Truck to Success seminars, when you have this conversation about financing and about lease purchase agreements, are there folks in the room that kind of have a light bulb goes off moment?
Oh, absolutely, because also what I talk about is the interest rates that the ranges can be. And you can have interest rates on these trucks and trailers anywhere from 6% on up to 60%. Why? It's not a regulated industry. So those lenders can charge whatever they want. And we all know when you start talking about higher interest rates, the more interest you're paying for that equipment, that's the less out of your bottom dollar. And that's your profit. You need that. So yes, the light bulbs do come on, and they are shocked at the fact that lenders can get away with charging that much interest.
What's the thing from someone who's just starting out, and I'll ask both of you this question, what's the thing in terms of financing and credit applications and all of I just keep seeing like money signs just flying all over the place. And I know that's overwhelming again, which we've talked about, but what's the most common, I guess, question or concern or really the most common issue that people starting out run into with regard to what we're talking about here?
I think the number one thing is they don't have enough money set aside. With working in our past finance department, insurance department, and claims department, the one thing that I hear from our members the most is I just didn't have enough set aside for the accident that took me off the road for 3 weeks, or the emergency back home and I wasn't running and now I don't have any money and now my lender won't extend my loan payment and I'm in trouble. So it's the money being set aside, I think, is the big key that a new owner-operator needs to.
Yeah. No, excuse me, I'm in complete agreement. And it's things like that make anybody vulnerable to predatory practices.
Absolutely.
It's the same as the person out there that has that goes to the payday loan time after time after time because they just don't have enough money set aside for all the emergencies that are popping up. And you see, the people that create these lease purchase agreements, they understand that. And they know that very, very well.
Very well.
And so they present this contract there and they offer you the moon and the stars and everything in between. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks on, this trucker's getting not just their paycheck, but it's actually a bill, for a negative $200 balance that they accrued this week.
Yeah. Well, and then at the end of it, too, they end up owing a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. The company gets the truck, and you're left holding the bag with literally a bill to pay.
Absolutely.
And nothing to
And they then take that same truck and turn it around and spruce it up a little bit and
do it all over again.
Offer it right back to the next driver that comes along.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, the underlying message that you want to relay to people during Truck to Success, again, we're talking about financing, we're talking about credit applications, good credit scores, all of this. What's kind of the underlying message that you want to make sure that people are walking away with after you talk to them?
The best message is that credit runs our life. It is very important.
For better and for worse.
Yes.
Maybe for worse. I don't know.
So the earlier you start to establish credit and get that built up and basically build a portfolio for yourself so you have something to show a lender. I have the ability to repay this loan. That's what they want to see. They want to see the stability. They want to see payments made on time and that you just have the commitments and that you pay your commitments.
Yeah. And I imagine there are a lot of people that don't have that. And if that's the case, is that a situation where you say, hey, maybe wait a year or two?
Absolutely.
And build that up?
Yes.
Be a company driver for a little bit. Get your feet under you.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before. You talk to plenty of people. Plenty of people come to the seminar thinking, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. And they leave the seminar after even 1 day, 2 days, 3 days saying, I am not ready. And that is perfectly okay.
Yes.
You want to make sure you're walking into this. It is a huge commitment. You want to make sure you're doing it right. And there's no shame in walking away and say, hey, I need a year or two.
The whole point is truck to success.
Yeah.
If you're not ready to succeed, then we want to get you to a place where you will be ready to succeed. And if that takes a little bit longer, then so be it. That whole point, we want you to succeed.
Well said. Yeah, that is the goal here. And again, so much to keep in mind, all of it important, but laying that groundwork is key. Charles, Margot, we appreciate it, and we'll see you in October, I guess.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Some housekeeping here. Truck to Success runs for 3 days starting October 22nd in Blue Springs, Missouri. There is an in-person option and a virtual option. The early bird deadline to register, which comes with a discount, is September 1st. And for more information or to sign up, check out trucktosuccess.com. We'll step out for a short break, but don't go far. Landline Now returns in just a moment.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Traditionally, truckers and enforcement officers are considered to be on opposite sides, but in fact, sometimes they do work together, and when they do, it tends to go very well. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. The latest example of truckers and troopers working together is in Wisconsin, which for several years now has had a program called Trooper in a Truck. I spoke recently with Sergeant Daniel Diedrich of the Wisconsin State Patrol about the program, what's involved, and how it worked out. Obviously, we're talking here about the Trooper in a Truck program, and by the name, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but just for folks who don't know, can you explain what the program is and basically how it works?
Of course. So the Trooper in a Truck program, what it does is actually partners some of our law enforcement staff with members of the commercial motor vehicle industry to do a joint educational and enforcement detail to kind of get both perspectives and be effective with trying to reduce some of the aggressive and unsafe driving that not only us as law enforcement, but the members of the commercial motor vehicle industry see on a daily basis.
Let's talk about what happens when one of the officers in the truck spots some kind of problem from their vantage point in there. What happens next?
So we usually have 1 to 3 staff that are operating with the commercial motor vehicle. When they identify a violation, moving or otherwise, they will radio ahead to some pre-positioned staff that we've got that essentially they coordinate to identify the vehicle that's in question, and then they confirm that they have the correct vehicle, and then a traffic stop ensues from there. So, for example, if we have a situation where we observe a driver texting while they're driving, the person in the commercial vehicle will say, "Hey, I've got a red sedan with X license plate in the lane number 1 that I observed texting while driving." Essentially the chase car will locate the vehicle, and then the person that's going to be making the traffic stop gives a verbal communication that, is this the correct vehicle? Yes, that is the correct vehicle, and then the traffic stop ensues.
What is the reasoning behind doing this? And by that I mean working with truckers and other commercial drivers. So
one of the biggest reasons that we want to partner with the commercial motor vehicle industry is just so that we can kind of gain some more knowledge from our perspective of what they see on a daily basis, and then address some of the safety concerns that the general motoring public doesn't even have access to. I know even as I'm in my personal vehicle, I'm driving in my pickup truck or my car. There's a lot of we see a lot of violations even as it is, but it's amplified. Call it 5 to 10-fold when you get above the height of normal traffic. So we really want to partner with these local carriers. There are issues, and this is how we want to work with the industry to try and remedy some of the things that they're dealing with on a daily basis.
Now, this is an annual event now. How long has it been going on, and how did it get started?
So we kind of started, we'll say, in its infancy about 2015. We had made some partnerships locally to kind of do some joint training with our staff and also with commercial motor vehicle drivers in the area to try and get to give them a perspective of what we do as far as, this is what a roadside inspection looks like. This is what we're looking for on a day-to-day basis. What are you guys looking for? What do you see as far as both issues with, regular traffic and commercial drivers? And in conjunction with that, we actually had the opportunity to go through some of the commercial driving simulators so that we can kind of get a little bit better handle on what does a driver deal with as far as their blind spots in the mirrors, and what is it like to actually operate a truck without operating a truck. And then we've also offered some ride-along opportunities to these folks so that they can get a little bit better perspective of what we as law enforcement operate, on a day-to-day basis as well.
You did this in conjunction with the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's Operation Safe Driver, which was, of course, in early July. Why that week in particular?
So the Wisconsin State Patrol, we are members of CVSA. So we do participate in all of their safety initiatives throughout the year. So this was just another great opportunity for us to really focus on just what the initiative was built around, Operation Safe Driver. What can we as a law enforcement agency do to try and impact the general traffic and also commercial traffic? A lot of these CVSA initiatives are focused on the commercial drivers, but where we've lost some of the mix is that CMV crashes don't just involve CMVs. And a lot of times the crash data supports that it's actually passenger vehicles that are operating aggressively or recklessly around the commercial drivers that end up involving the commercial drivers. So it's just a really good campaign to not only focus on commercial motor vehicle operations as far as, are the CMV drivers wearing the seatbelts, operating at a safe speed, limiting the distractions that we all know that they have. But then how can we impact the general passenger vehicles as well that are operating in the vicinity of CMVs is kind of the foundation for why we wanted to get that education out during that particular initiative.
Truckers are obviously very familiar with the perspective they have from being up higher than the rest of traffic, and they certainly see some interesting things. But I'm wondering if you could describe from the law enforcement officer's point of view how being in the truck gives them an advantage or at least a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of goes to some of the comments that I've made earlier. It's just getting above that line of sight. And actually being able to intermingle with the traffic in, I don't want to say an undercover perspective, but let's face it, anytime that you see a marked police vehicle or a vehicle that maybe even if it's not marked, it looks just like a police vehicle, we know that driving behavior changes at those points. So this just gives us a very good opportunity to essentially sit shotgun with the driver and see exactly what they see without that distraction of a potential law enforcement vehicle there. The way that we set up these details is that the chase cars or the enforcement cars, they're usually set up just ahead of the commercial vehicle. So in many cases, the drivers really don't know that they're anywhere near a police vehicle until after we've already observed the violation, and we're in the process of coordinating that enforcement action.
Were there particular types of problems or particular violations that the officers involved were looking for this year?
We're always looking for, seatbelt usage. The state of Wisconsin we've been trying for decades to increase the percentage of safety belt use because it directly relates to serious injury and fatal crashes. Obviously, the hot topic over the last 5 to 6 years has been distracted driving, whether that be texting while driving or watching a movie or surfing the internet. Obviously, with the popularity of handheld phone devices, we've seen a drastic rise in the amount of distracted driving. So we're really looking at anything that would be distracted, whether it be from your cell phone or it could be something as simple as changing the radio station, or we've seen people putting on makeup while they're trying to operate down the roadway. But we use that in conjunction with seatbelt violations, and then directly related to commercial motor vehicles is safe following distance and other speeding and aggressive driving type behavior. So we've had some situations where the commercial driver is following way too closely, but we've seen the similar with passenger vehicles. They're just following too closely, and if the commercial driver had to react to something in front of them, it's going to happen that there's going to be a crash.
I'm kind of curious if you can talk a little bit about some of the previous years you've done this. What have the results been? And what I mean is, how successful was the effort in previous years in terms of education and enforcement?
Yeah, so I think the results I would say they've been very steady. I don't have any specific statistics, but we've made contact with hundreds of vehicles during these initiatives, and we've ramped up the education and some of the pre-deployment type press so that everybody just has a little bit higher awareness to not driving distracted, and we should be doing that on a daily basis. But specifically around these initiatives, these are not a aha, I got you type situation, because we do realize that the patrol technique of being with a commercial motor vehicle is definitely not the norm. But we've had some very good success with really getting drivers to understand what the thought process is, as far as, like, hey, we saw that you passed the vehicle and you didn't have your seatbelt on, and it's, oh, I forgot, or I just took it off for a second, or just having a little bit more awareness to, we saw that you were texting on your phone. Believe it or not, we get a lot of folks that are like, you're absolutely right, I was, and I was distracted at the time, and that's a behavior I need to correct.
I'm kind of curious. I think people hearing this will think this was a statewide effort, that this was happening across Wisconsin. But in looking over some of the details online, it appears that it was conducted in several different particular areas. And I saw Hudson, Waukesha, Madison, Green Bay, and Wausau. Why those places in particular in Wisconsin?
So we selected the locations based off of a couple of different factors. Obviously, we look at our staff and where we've got them throughout the state, where we can have the biggest impact. We also looked at population density and the size of the communities that we're trying to impact. Obviously, we would love to have a significant footprint in every corner of the state of Wisconsin. However, that's not reality. So we picked some higher population density areas. And this is also, we work very closely with the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association. So we are reliant on that partnership to help us identify carriers that are willing to participate with us. And it just so happened to be that the carriers were kind of in those locations or had access to vehicles. So it's kind of a broad variety of reasons. I don't, historically, I don't know that we've used the exact same locations. And I think, moving forward, we would like to expand our footprint during these initiatives. It just so happened to be that with the partnership that we have with the Motor Carriers Association and looking at some of our crash data in those specific areas, those were the predetermined areas for this year's efforts.
You mentioned the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association and, of course, the motor carriers that you worked with. But I'm curious about the individual truck drivers, the people behind the wheel. What has their reaction been to taking part in this?
I think it's been very well received. Obviously, I don't feel like any of the drivers felt like they were forced into participating in this initiative. I think from a driver perspective, we've gotten some very positive comments about the level of initiative that we as an agency have taken to try and relate to some of their concerns. We know that as drivers, they see a ton of things. I mean, there's literally drivers putting in millions of miles over the course of a career. And how many times have they said, man, where was that? And this is one of those opportunities for us to kind of be there when they need us. And the partnership has been fantastic. And I think the drivers have really been well received to having the partnership and being able to build those relationships with the local officers. Whether they or not they operate in that jurisdiction or that section of the state every day, they know that we're out there looking for those violations, maybe a little bit more attentively as each year progresses. But to be able to have that opportunity to say, yeah, see, this is what I see every day, and I'm glad that we can actually try and improve some of the highway safety at that moment's notice, I think it's had a big impact with the drivers.
That was Sergeant Daniel Diedrich of the Wisconsin State Patrol talking about the state's Trooper in a Truck program, one of several state programs involving enforcement officers riding in large trucks in order to spot violations by other vehicles. You can keep up on state enforcement efforts at landline.media. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. A coalition of organizations, including OOIDA, has sent a letter to the U.S. House asking them to take specific action on truck parking. Here to bring us up to date is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself, Mark?
Very well, thank you. So let's start with who we're talking about here. Who are the other organizations in this coalition?
Yeah, so we've got a great group of associations with us here, and they include the Midwest Truckers Association, Truckload Carriers Association, National Association of Small Trucking Companies, Western States Trucking Association, the American Trucking Association, TIA, the Transportation Intermediaries Association, NATSO, the National Association of Truck Stop Operators, and Institute for Safer Trucking, one of a trucking safety organization. There's still some others that I'm leaving off. I could go through the whole list, but it's about 15 or so groups, 15, almost 20 groups here that we've got that have signed on to this letter in support of trying to get this truck parking bill over the finish line.
It's interesting you mentioned NATSO, the organization of truck stop operators, being involved in this, because I know on some parking efforts, for example, commercialization of rest areas, they have not been encouraging or supportive of that at all. What do you think it is about this particular proposal that drew them in?
Well, one of the things that we've been working, especially obviously, this is something that we've been leading, but working very closely with our bill sponsors. Congressman Mike Bost from Illinois has been the champion on this. But we've been working to ensure that public-private partnerships are part of this legislation. So as I'm sure everyone knows by now, the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, would dedicate and establish a grant program for expanding truck parking capacity. But as part of that program, private entities would be able to they would be able to partner with the public entity and build out truck parking. So you could have the example we always talk about is in Weed, California, where there's a public parking lot that's adjacent to a lot of private businesses that were able to make use of the truck parking. So same thing goes for NATSO by ensuring that there's funds can be used for those public-private partnerships. I think that's a big part of what's been able to bring them on board here.
And something you mentioned there we didn't get quite to yet is explaining what this letter is asking the House to do. And obviously it's passed the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, but there's more to the letter than that. Can you kind of go over some of the other details?
Yeah, the biggest thing and what we lead off with is that this legislation was passed out of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee last year in May by a vote of 60-4. So there's not a whole lot of stuff that flies through committee like that on a bipartisan vote. So first and foremost, we're telling the letters to House Speaker Mike Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And what we're asking them to do is to come together and finally put this bill to a vote on the House floor. So first of all, we point out that this passed T&I committee with broad bipartisan support. The other point that is a little more in the weeds and not something that's really related to the truck parking issue, but more about this legislation, is that the bill itself does not spend any money. So this gets into congressional procedure and the federal government more generally, but you have the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. What they do is they authorize programs. So this legislation itself would set up and establish this program dedicated to expanding truck parking capacity. it would still be up to that appropriations process, which we've talked about recently. That's the annual spending bills that we talk about all the time, to actually allocate money and provide for spending those dollars. So with this letter, we've pointed out that passing this legislation does not obligate the government, does not obligate Congress to spend any money. Instead, it's following, what we think is the regular order of Congress by setting up programs, allowing the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee to set up these programs. And then later you have the Appropriations Committee in Congress working its will through the spending process to actually spend the money. So we're making sure to point out that this legislation itself will not cost Congress anything.
And again, we're talking about the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, or H.R. 2367. Are there any other details in the bill that people need to be aware of, Bryce?
And I think it's important to point out, we talked a little bit earlier how NATSO, the truck stop operators, are on board and supportive of this legislation. But crucially, the bill also ensures that any parking that's made or constructed with this legislation, there wouldn't be a fee charged for that parking, whether through reservation or anything else. So we know it's really important that this parking is available to people, to truckers who have already paid for this infrastructure through their tax dollars, through fuel taxes and things like that. So that's a really important part of this legislation that we made sure was in there.
Did the letter address why the groups involved see it as urgent right now to pass this bill?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing over and over again, is that the problem only continues to get worse, and that it continues to be a major safety issue. We highlighted in our letter the tragedy in Illinois where a Greyhound bus crashed into trucks that were parked on the shoulder because at least one of those drivers said that they were out of available driving hours. And it's frustrating. This wasn't mentioned in the letter, but OOIDA VP Louis Pugh said he passed by that location and saw yet again that there are trucks left with no other option but to park in that same location, in similar locations. So it's one of those things that we just know it is not getting better. So there's no better time to act than right now.
We talk a lot on the show about co-sponsors and how many co-sponsors are on a particular bill. How many co-sponsors does this have in the House at this time?
So right now we have 49 co-sponsors, and this is not by any specific effort, but we actually have 25 Republicans and 24 Democrats. So pretty darn close, about as close as you can get with an odd number to Republicans and Democrats supporting and co-sponsoring this bill. So I think, again, that really speaks to how important this is, how bipartisan it is, and how broad a support this legislation has.
There is something where OOIDA has often urged members and other truckers to call their members of Congress, as we're talking about here. And we've talked before about the unique opportunities that this point in time, August, provides in that regard. And of course, but explain why August is different from any other month in terms of getting a hold of members of the House.
Yeah, and so, here in D.C., we call it August recess because members all head out of town back to their states and their districts. But, if you're on the state side of things, that's when members are heading back home, talking to the constituents, doing site visits, engaging with their constituents. So it's a good time if you're able to catch your representative or even your senators back at home. And frankly, that's where really good conversations can happen as well. I think a lot of the time, and it's true, people come here to Washington, D.C. to talk to their lawmakers about issues and lobby them on their priorities. But it's just as important and can be just as impactful if you're able to do that while they're back home during this summer work period. That's through August here.
Okay. What are some of the places where you can get face-to-face with a member of Congress? Because that's one of the unique opportunities that August provides that I find most interesting, is the ability to actually get FaceTime with your member of the House.
Yeah, and so lawmakers, they have offices throughout their district. And the best way, if you're two ways, I mean, you can always call the Capitol switchboard. It's 202-224-3121. You can give them your address and they'll connect you to your lawmaker's office. And with that, you can find out more information about their district offices, how to get in touch with them, and really how to set up a meeting and connect with them there. So, good lawmakers are always looking to connect with their constituents, whether it's at one of their offices that they have or even, somewhere else, some other location.
Okay. Well, Bryce, we're out of time, but thank you very much for the information.
Great. Thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. That's our show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system at a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forgetness, accuracy, when you're truck on a CAT scale.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am
a
professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.